Models of Adult Learning and Development. Brought to you by Education and Training Associates. Powered by Siena Education Services.
We're going to talk about adult learning and development. We're going to talk about, first, how do adults get to be adults? And what is different about adults? And when does someone actually become intellectually an adult? We know now when that happens. We're aware now. Okay. We're going to talk a bit about Jung, Carl Jung's life stages. He was a disciple of the famous psychiatrist Sigmund Freud. We're then going to talk about Lovinger's worldview and relationships, Jane Lovinger. We're going to add Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I know many of you have already been exposed to Maslow, but he also had some very specific things to say about teachers and teaching, and it's important for us to get that information. We're going to talk about Malcolm K. Knowles' theory of andragogy, pedagogy, andragogy. Before Jung's life stages, children were treated as little adults. There was nothing wrong by anybody's standards with a 7-year-old child going behind a horse and wagon, loading hay on top with his 10-year-old brother. There still isn't in some communities, notably the Mennonite and Amish community. In New England, in the mills, child labor was okay. First of all, only a child could fit in the small space behind the mills where they needed people to go in, change settings and do all of that. An adult couldn't fit. There was physical punishment. Spare the rod, spoil the child. They were considered tabula rasa. That is, children were considered a blank slate that the parents and other adults wrote on. We're going to teach them everything. And we taught them. Now, part of the way we taught them sometimes was whipping them. My father grew up in this sort of, let's say, kind of an era where this was still very, very much practiced. And he and his brother, Wilfred John, acted up, and when their mother came to punish them, they jumped underneath the bed. And she proceeded to take the bed apart in order to give them both a switching. That was how it was viewed. We believed in those days that children don't have any personality, they're just blank. We know better now. We know that some children are born with personality traits, some are shyer, some are more outgoing. It's just the way life is. Life was viewed as a steady trip from birth to grave. Do you know there was no such term as adolescent? There was no such term as teenager. There was no Generation X. There was none of that. It didn't exist. You were born, you learned, you did, you died. That was life. It was all just a nice little steady trip. Jung came in, and he was the first one to say, there are stages of development. Jung said, youth was a time of expanding consciousness, awareness, that you're learning about the world and yourself and your parents and your everything. He then said, middle age was when you questioned the long-held convictions. I think he got that one wrong, because all I know about is me, and I began questioning those long-held convictions sometime in my teens. So I must have been a middle-ager when I was 13, and I'm sure some of you were too. He got that one wrong, but he got the old age one right. Increased introspection and self-evaluation. If I live the lifespan of the average white American male who has lived to be 75, I have approximately 6 years left. The statistics say 81. And those actuarial tables are generally pretty accurate. So there's a couple of things that can't happen. Nobody can waste my time. It's way too precious. But I also have to look back, what did I do? What did I accomplish, and what can I still accomplish? What do I still have to do with the time that is given to me? And looking at my successes and my failures. And it is introspective. You turn much more into yourself as you get older. Jung got that one right on the head. Now, this is the one we all use in the social sciences today. This is the gold standard. Jane Lovinger's hierarchy of ego, worldview, and relationships. It's very complicated, but I have simplified it to the point where it has some value to us. She said the first stage of life is impulsive. Babies are totally impulsive. They do everything on impulse, don't they? They want to go to the bathroom, they go. They don't care where. They don't care where, they don't care when, and they don't care at all. We have almost no instincts except to suck when we're born. Unlike a goose. A goose is born with everything it needs to know to be a goose. We don't. They are impulsive. We never quite lose that. It just gets overlaid. Tonight, let's say Cheryl and I, after class, decide we'd like to go out for dinner. And I say, hey, let's do it up right. Let's go to the most expensive, hotshot restaurant we can find. Now, that's pretty impulsive. Given the state of my wallet, that's very impulsive. But we don't lose it. It just gets overlaid. And the next stage is self-protective. And if you've ever raised a child, you know this. This outgoing baby all of a sudden hides behind when strangers come. If I took a sheet of clear lucite from here to here and put an infant face down on it, they don't care. If I put a toddler on there face down, they're scared because they've learned something. They have tried up and they have fallen down. They have learned down hurts. Down, I don't want down. I want up. I don't want to fall. And they become self-protective. And this is called the making shy age. And almost all children go through it. Only the oddest, most outgoing person in the world doesn't have this stage. I'm going to tell you something important. We'll talk about it later. Some people get stuck here. Because of a lack of nurturance in the first 18 to 24 months of their life, they get stuck in the self-protective phase. And they are interesting people, and you will get one in your class if you already haven't had one. Next is conformist. That's where the kid goes to bed because mom and dad said you're going to bed. He doesn't know why he has to go to bed. He doesn't know why he has to go to bed then. He wasn't tired. Why do I have to go to bed? Why do I have to take a bath? Why do I have to wash my hands? He doesn't know because mom said so and dad said so. That's why. And that's what they do. They conform to the rules, not necessarily deeply understanding any of them. Then they become what's called a conscientious conformist. They begin to understand why there are rules. In some cases, I'm conformist. If the speed limit is 65, I don't go over 69. That's conformist. If I were a conscientious conformist, I'd do 65. But I also know I'm not going to get a ticket at 69. But I will get one at 72. Next is conscientious. This is when you have a fully developed conscience. This is when all of your decisions get filtered through this belief system that you hold in your heart and in your mind. Any decision you make, you'll know if it's good. You'll know if you're doing something wrong. I know when I'm doing 69, it's wrong. The next stage is individualistic. You cannot be in this stage if you're living home, because you still have to live by somebody else's rules. My daughter, she went to a college like 3 miles from where we lived. And she wanted to stay at the house. And Cheryl and I convinced her that dormitory life was part of the college experience. Actually, we wanted her to get the heck out of the house. But we did convince her. And she thanked us, she said, because she didn't have to follow our rules and regimen. She could set most of her own standard. That's individualistic. And when you get all of these put together perfectly, you are an integrated adult. Let's go back to the self-protective. Some people get lost in the self-protective. Some are lost there because of a mental deficiency, but most of them are there because of a lack of love, nurturance, and a sense of security. They never felt safe. And since they don't feel safe, they're always out to protect themselves. And they dwell on their safety to the point where, believe it or not, you do not exist. The outside world is a whole bunch of people that need to be handled, manipulated, dealt with me on top. They're often intelligent. They're often charming. We had one in our family. We had a little boy who in 6th grade convinced his teacher that he lived on this farm with horses and everything. Well, he did live in a small farm, and they had a goat. He wrote notes to convince the teacher of this. She actually arranged for a school bus to visit the farm. When it was discovered, because he tried to cover with his parents and they figured out what had happened, because he had been known to do things like this in the past. I want you to, when you think about someone who is a psychopath, this is what they are, psychopathological. They are psychopathological. They don't care about you. They only care about moi. Think Miss Piggy. But they can turn into sociopaths. And that is a psychopath who has chosen to create a criminal act. Think Ted Bundy. Charming, handsome, intelligent, manipulative, vicious, self-protective. We have had so many teachers, when I say this, come to me afterward and say, I had one. Here's what happened to me. I'll give you one example. Where we teach in Manhattan, the director had to get a cease and desist order and an order of protection from this man, former student, who threatened her. One of the teachers mentioned that this girl was very angry with her in class. And when she walked out to go home that day, her total car had been keyed from one end to the other over and over and over and over again. Another teacher, one of her female students who was psychopathological, sicked her boyfriend on the teacher, followed her home, and went to beat her up. Didn't happen. It could have, but her husband happened to be home that day, and when she pulled in the driveway, he came out to greet her. They will take you down in your career. They are effective liars. They're great at lying. They can convince people of the most irrational things. And if they don't like you, you're the target. If you see, hint, smell any psychopathological behavior on the part of a student, please document it. This is for your self-protection. Document it. Give a copy to your dean, sitting over here, the Eagles, and keep a copy in your own file at home. You are responsible for your career. The school does take some responsibility for your career, but the ultimate responsibility for your career lies with you. Teacher rules. If it isn't, what's the teacher rule? It isn't in writing. It didn't happen. Got it. I don't want to beat this to death, but I want you to just be aware, okay? Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow, a very brilliant man, tremendous insights, a genius, came up with this concept of needs and information. Now, he said at the bottom level, biological needs. If you're a mother in Darfur and you are losing weight and you're nursing a child and you find that you are unable to continue nursing because you do not produce any milk, you don't care whether the ballet is coming to town or not. They just need coping information. Coping. Just, where do I get the next meal? How do I take care of my baby? Where do I find this? Where do I get this? How do I get that? It's basic stuff. And there are, in this world, there are tons of people in that position. You may end up someday with a homeless student. If you taught in Manhattan, I'll guarantee you'll end up with a homeless student. And their first goal is, where do I sleep tonight? Where do I get dinner tonight? He said the next level up, after you've got your biological needs, you need some security. You can't create your own security totally. To create security, you need help. You need a police force or somebody with authority. You need somebody to enforce regulations. You need all kinds of things. The information needed is helping information. And if you currently live in a war-torn area of Afghanistan, how secure do you think you feel on a day-to-day basis? With the IEDs and the bombs, you don't feel very, very secure. Once those needs are met, then you can start thinking about the social needs. Now, this one and the next one can be interchanged, I think. Social and ego. Social needs are looking for somebody who would be your friend, someone who might be your life partner, some other that will matter in your life, or others. And social, you need to be enlightened. In other words, you have to find out about the people you meet. You got to get to know them. You got to talk to them. You got to get to know them a little bit. Now, he said that came before ego needs. But I say it can be either way. If you need to know who you are, where you are, and who you think you are, you have to have a sense of yourself. And for that kind of a need, you need to be empowered. Now, the reason I say it can go either way is a lot of people say, look, before you go out and try to find a life partner, make sure you know who you are. Because that way you're not likely to make as many mistakes. And the last one, he called, and this is really interesting, he called it fulfillment or self-actualization. And what kind of need? Well, here you can be edified. You can worry about whether the ballet's coming. You can learn new things. You can increase your knowledge, your information, your base. Now, here's your problem. If you've got 20-somethings, late teens, early 20s in your class, they're here. They're more concerned about where they're going out Friday night with their friends than whether your homework assignment gets done or not. Problem is, you're up here. Do you see why it is a little harder to teach people who have not reached a certain level of maturity? Now, there are some biological changes that occur. And they occur differently in different people, but sometime in the early 20s, there is a change. We have two hemispheres of a brain, right? They're linked by something called a corpus callosum. That link is weak in children. They'll do things, if this was, let's say, the impulsive part, and this is the thoughtful part of consequences and so on and so forth. It's weak in young people. They do things without worrying about the consequences. That's why an awful lot of crimes are committed by people in their early 20s, late teens. They're still impulsive. They're not fully mature. The corpus callosum, somewhere in the early 20s, makes stronger, it doesn't get bigger, it makes stronger connections. And adults now begin to say, ooh, if I do this, that could happen. If I act this way, this could happen. If I don't do my homework, this can happen. But that can only happen when that corpus callosum has fully connected. So I'm not saying you're fighting a losing battle with young people, because when that corpus callosum isn't well connected, they still are sponges. They are still absorbing information. Yes?
So what you're saying is that they know the difference between right and wrong, but they do it anyway?
Yeah. It isn't just right or wrong. They often don't think about the consequences of their actions. They're out with their friends. They're out doing something stupid. They decide they're going to walk on the railroad trestle.
I did. Walked on the railroad tracks all the time.
Yep. The consequences are not quite solidly connected. There's the difference. Once the corpus callosum connects, You're aware of the consequences of your actions, your behaviors, everything. You become aware. It isn't that they don't know right from wrong. It's that they don't worry about what's going to happen next.
We'll worry about that later.
Yep. We'll worry about that tomorrow. I'm going to get drunk tonight. I'll worry about that tomorrow. Joanne?
Usually that happens around 24, 25.
Earlier. Somewhere between 21 and 23 or 4.
Is that when it's developed, or is
That's when it starts to develop, and it's fully developed by 25.
okay? That's what. Yeah.
Yeah. This is new research. This stuff just came out. It only came out in 2011. They did some research, and they came up with this concept in 2011. And, of course, Malcolm Knowles was thrilled because he had been saying something like that right along. Children, that's before the corpus callosum is fully developed. They absorb information. They're like a sponge. They don't question the need for learning. They learn it. Teacher says, we're going to read Shakespeare. I don't want to read Shakespeare. But if you say I have to read Shakespeare, I'll read Shakespeare. Course 1, I told you, never teach a lesson without a need statement. Because adults ask, why do I need this? Children don't. They'll just do it. But I think high school English teachers would have a lot more success if they said, you know why we're going to read William Shakespeare? He has tremendous insight into how people operate under extreme stress and how they behave and act and how sometimes they act against their own best interests. Then they want to read more. Children have little life experience. They're motivated from outside. If you put a star on an 8-year-old's forehead, they will love you forever. Put a star on my forehead, the wrinkles would drop it off in a second and a half. They have boundless energy. Children have boundless energy. They memorize very well, very easily. And they view learning as just gathering more information, collecting more and more information. Adults, on the other hand, don't absorb information. We're like a sponge that's been sitting under a leaky faucet. We are full of information. When we get hit with something new, you know what our brain does? It begins searching to see if it's like something I already knew. Making an analogy, saying, this is a lot like this. This is a lot like this. So what does a great teacher do? Make the analogies for them. Give them some analogies. Look, this is complicated, but it's an awful lot like this. They have had greater life experience. They like being recognized for that life experience. Generally speaking, adults are motivated from inside. I need the job. I need to know this. I got to get through this. That's what there is. They are tired. They are often tired. Adults are tired. You're tired. I'm tired. Adults are tired. Adults learn by doing, best by doing. Adults learn what they call experientially. In other words, if you teach something and they don't use that, it's gone. With adults, it's use it or lose it. Adults view learning as problem solving. For example, you, out in the classroom, you got a problem. What's your problem? You need a certificate. How do you solve that problem to get that certificate? You come to class, but you also know that if you don't do the work, you don't get the certificate. So you do the work. Everything you do is to solve that problem. And adults view learning as, I've got a problem, I don't know this, and I need to know it to have the job. That's how they view it. Pedagogy versus andragogy. Well, I already gave you that, didn't I? And Colleen, how was my Greek?
Very good.
Thank you. I had a Greek student who taught me, I was saying pedagogy, and I said, it's from the Greek pedagogia. And they said, no, pedagogia. And it's andragogia. And I said, oh, okay, I got it. See, even I can learn. Knowles' theory of andragogy. He did a whole bunch of educational experience, a bunch of things that he discovered. Adults need to know why they're learning something. If they don't feel that what they're learning has value, they will do to you what I can do to anybody by shutting off my hearing aids. You all disappear. I don't hear you anymore. But they don't even need hearing aids to shut you off. They can close their eyes and shut you off. Adults need to learn experientially. They learn by making analogies. They approach learning as problem solving. And they learn best if the topic has some value to them right away. They can actually use it. Like when I teach you about constructive learning, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to give you a constructive project. You already do instructive, don't you? Our schools do instructive. You stand up and you teach, don't you? Right in front of the class. That's instructive. You also do cognitive. When they're in a lab or a clinic or something, don't you walk around and look at what they're doing and offer suggestions and help and correct mistakes and take care of this, that, and the other thing? That you already do. What you don't do very well is project-based education. Proprietary schools tend to be weak in the project-based education, the constructive education. Do not teach a thing without a needs statement. Learning should be task-oriented, not memorized. Students should be helped to make analogies. If you can make an analogies, if you can say, this is a lot like that. If you can say a blunt cut on a base is kind of like when you were a kid with scissors and you started the cut, it keeps going in whatever direction you started it. Teachers should accommodate various experience and knowledge levels. Adults like to learn through discovery. They really do. They like the labs, the clinics, the stuff where they get their hands dirty. It's the fun part of their day. Sitting and listening to me is not the fun part of your day. Teachers must set links to the work world. What are we preparing students for? Work. So whenever you can say, this is connected to your work, this will be connected to what you're going to be doing every day. You've got to know how to do this or else. Principles of andragogy. Adults should be involved in planning and evaluation. Did you see that part, evaluation? They shouldn't just take tests. They should question the quality of their work as they do it. Experience includes making mistakes. This is Cheryl's saying she taught to me. Wrong is wonderful because you learn from your mistakes. You don't do them again. How many of you ever dated somebody you wish you had never gone out with in your life? Put your hands up. How many of you went ahead and married that person? But I'll guarantee you, see, my first marriage lasted 4 years. This one's 40. I made pretty doggone sure it was going to be 40.
We haven't killed each other. This is really good.
Yeah. Materials relate to the student's job. Materials relate to either the student's job or real-world needs. Learning should always be problem-centered. Here's a problem. How should we solve it? Then you give them the tools through skills, or give them the information so they can solve it. But once you've given them the tools and the information, let them solve the problem. They love doing it. Adult learners, they are mature. Well, after the corpus callosum, they're mature. They have concrete and immediate needs. They really do need that job. They're not here to fool around. For many of them, this is the last chance cafe. They've tried other things and failed. They are very impatient. They want it yesterday. They have experienced a lot of life, and they bring so much with them. As I say, some of them had unbelievably successful careers in another area and got laid off, downsized, aged out. They love it when you recognize their talent or their information. That, when they know something and you say, I like that, that's good. They really love it. They are motivated from internal. They have no choice. And as we said earlier, they are often tired. Here's some classroom realities. Students often construct knowledge. You teach something. It goes into their brain. And their brain searches for analogies. And their brain searches for understanding and meaning. And they come up with a construct. They come up with an idea of what it is that you just taught them. Here's the problem. Sometimes the idea doesn't match what you taught them. That's a classroom reality. Unless you are constantly checking Where are the students? Remember what we said when we did the course where you give them back a test, you go over every single answer and you tell them the answer isn't wrong. It's just not the one I expected. Please defend yours. And Jessica did defend hers and she won. Because she was right. It was a logical answer. But you need to know when those constructs are going awry, and they do go awry. They have tremendous, sometimes, misinterpretation and misinformation. They need the whole picture. The problem is when you're teaching a highly skilled field, you can't teach the whole thing at once. You teach a little bit, then a little more, then a little more. You can't teach somebody a 75-step process. But the problem is if you're teaching in little bites, how do they put that together? How does that? So you have to keep searching ways to tie that bite into the entire thing of what their job will be. It isn't easy. But if you want to be a successful teacher, you have the capacity to teach small bits and bites of information and then have the students click them together in a sense that allows them to see the broader implication of the bites. They're selectively negligent. Adults are selectively negligent. Oh, I don't need this. It's not going to be on the test, therefore I'm not going to study it. They're driven by assessment. Is it on the test? The answer to that is always yes, because it can be. The state of New York giving out licensing tests can ask any question they feel like. So yes, it could be on your test. But they still will determine, I can get by without this. And that's where you get these holes in their education. They've got little chunks that are missing. They do some things very well and some things they don't do at all. They often only memorize. So, even though they're not good at memorizing, even though they stink at memorizing, some students would rather memorize than actually put the energy and effort into understanding what's going on. Their attention is limited. Those 15-minute breaks are for me as much as for you. I lose attention. I get tired of hearing my own voice, and I know you do. So those breaks are important. They're easily overburdened. When you go home tonight, you're going to go home with an assignment. It's not going to be a huge assignment. But if it were a huge assignment and I didn't give you the time to do it, if I said you have a 6-hour project and you're still going to be here 30 hours in the classroom, you would say, rightfully so, hey, Marshall, I have a life. I have a life, believe it or not. I have things to do. Remember we said that we have to be cognizant of the fact that the students are giving us power over their breaks, when they lunch, when they come back, all of that they normally do for themselves. And we have to be aware and respect that. They learn best by doing. They also learn best when you advise them every once in a blue moon. Guess who's responsible for learning? The student. You are. I can't put in information and zip it closed. And it all varies. It varies. For some people, 10 minutes on the homework, they're all set. They've got a nice grade. For other people, it's an hour. we only guarantee equal opportunity for success. We don't guarantee equality in the learning process. It doesn't exist. Students are emotional beings. I heard someone actually say this. Now, don't take this personally. And when I hear that, it was upstairs, in fact. Somebody was coming out of the office, and he said to you, didn't he? Don't take this personally. I just reamed you, but please don't take it personally. Well, of course you take it personally. What idiocy was that? I sat there, and I happened to be on break at that moment. And I sat there and I said, does this guy have a clue? All I thought to myself is, I hope to God he's just an administrator and never has to teach anybody anything. Because that was the stupidest comment I've ever heard from anyone. You're really dumb, but don't take that personally.